Hello, everyone, and hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Lisa Martin with Silver Spring Town Center, and we are so happy to have you joining us for our art salon, winter art salon, Happy Accidents, which is inspired by the famous painter Bob Ross, who talked about happy accidents while painting. So I'm sure you have some stories of your own to share. And tonight's program is hosted by documentary filmmaker duo Simone Fari and Richard Hall with Nerds Make Media. We're so happy to have them here. Um, Before we get started, I just want to mention we are filming, but it's not necessarily going to be used for anything. We can edit it down, so including that comment. So we usually don't film the art salon, but we thought there might be some interesting bits to share with the community. Um, anyway, as you know, Silver Spring Town Center presents over 100 free arts and entertainment programs and events throughout the year. We have a robust calendar in celebration of African American Heritage Month. Next Tuesday, February 6th, we have uh, African American culinary traditions hosted by comic Haywood Turnipseed with an exciting lineup of panelists to share their own family food memories. Um, our tiny house building arts workshop is ongoing now with artist Marcy Wolf Hubbard on Thursday evenings, but it is at capacity. We also, on February 7th, Wednesday evening, we have object performance in the Black Atlantic in the studio with artist and author Paulette Richards, PhD. And that will also be on Zoom along with the African American culinary traditions. But we do have a big in-person event on Friday, February 9th. It's another annual around the world bazaar at the Silver Spring Civic Building. And we have two performance areas with arts and craft exhibitors, hands-on arts activities. Our two performance stages include a Bollywood wedding dance workshop and a Latin and Brazilian carnival dance party with DJ. We also have the freed female reenactors of distinction, who are the women Civil War heroines, who will be doing reenactments on the atrium stage along with a comedy show. And we also have Orfea, Bulgarian women's choir, as well as Hung Si Chinese lion dance, doing a performance kicking us off at 5 o'clock in the Great Hall as we celebrate the coming Lunar New Year. All of our events are made possible with generous support from Montgomery County, United Therapeutics, the Arts and Humanities of Montgomery County, Maryland State Arts, Montgomery College, and many others. And now I'd like to hand the reins over to our wonderful co-hosts, Simone Fari and Richard Hall with Nerds Make Media. So great to have you both guest hosting our art salon.
Thank you.
It's
Hello,
great
everyone.
it's great to see some old friends and some new friends too. Thank you all for coming. I'm going to encourage the conversation to be both as we talk and share, but also through the chat. So if you want to, go ahead and put in a sentence about who you are, maybe your website if you want to share that, your portfolio, your socials, whatever you want to share. Feel free to do that in the chat. And so really, I want to give a special thank you to Lisa, and just our lives has really thinking about it been so enriched by all the things that all these opportunities provided for us, and the people we've been able to meet, and just the plays and the theater and everything that we've been able to experience. So it's really been being able to host this is just a small way to say thank you for all that's been done for us. So I understand this is supposed to be a kind of a discussion and open mic. So I'm going to give just a little bit of background about the idea that I came up with, and a definition of happy accidents and a few discussion questions. But hopefully you will share. I view my role as facilitator to ensure that we all have a respectful and rich conversation. And one way I'm hoping we can do that is to be mindful that everyone gets to be heard who wants to be heard. So when you first speak, please keep your remarks relatively brief, a minute or two, so that we can make sure everybody's heard. And then, once everybody's heard, then we can be a little more free flowing. So, and if you could either raise your hand physically or use the hand icon so we can call on you, that would be great. But as promised, I'm going to give a very brief introduction into this topic. And this definition came from the Urban Dictionary. It's when something unexpectedly good comes from what would otherwise be considered a mishap. That's their definition of happy accident. And we all know about it because of Bob Ross, who didn't just say happy accident. He says, prefaced, if we don't make mistakes, we just have happy accidents. And so that's the framing to consider, right? Do we look at it as a mistake, or do we turn it around and see it as something with potential to be other than a mistake? And so we're hoping to share and hear all about your happy accidents. But here's a few questions maybe to get the conversation started if you can't come up with any happy accidents of your own. Is how do we embrace this mindset? How do we apply it to our own work? What good things could happen if we do, but also maybe what kind of cautions do we have to take to to it? And yes, what can you share in terms of happy accident? So, who would like to begin?
I could start with a couple of examples, Simone.
Thank you, Richard.
So I have a couple of happy accidents to share. In addition to being a filmmaker, I do artwork as well. And there are two examples I wanted to share. One was we got a bed. We have been collecting furniture for Afghan refugees in the past 3 years or so. And we got a bed that was good, but it had scratches on the headboard. So in order to cover that up, I decided to paint the headboard. And so I did this takeoff on Van Gogh's Starry Night. And instead of a church, I made a mosque there. And then the other accident was that we loaded it up in the truck and took it to their house. And when we got there, they already had their house full of furniture. So we kept the bed and we use it now.
A mysterious cousin showed up and must have ripped out his credit card and bought all this new furniture.
But if it hadn't been for the scratches, I would have never thought of painting this bed. And then the other happy accident I wanted to share was that our kitchen, we were redoing the floor with marmoleum. So I ordered a roll of marmoleum to do the floor. When I ordered it, I miscalculated and I came up short. So there was a section of the kitchen floor that wouldn't be covered. So I could return the marmoleum and get the right piece, but that was very expensive. So what I did was I decided to paint the floor. And we had recently, I had been at that time, and maybe still am, obsessed with Neolithic cave paintings. So this is a copy of a cave in France. So that's at the end of our kitchen now. But I never would have thought of that if I hadn't made a mistake with the marmoleum. So there's a couple of things a couple of happy accidents to start the conversation.
And now we get to keep the bed, and we're going to use that as our bed now in our new house. Anybody else like to share any thoughts about?
Roger.
Well, being a musician, whenever you're playing music that is based on improvisation or has that factor in it, and Richard and I have experienced this several times, you can do what some people would call a mistake, but you could also call it a happy accident, where the music goes in a direction you did not anticipate, but you follow it there, and it turns out pretty wonderful. So I think many times I've had such happy accidents that weren't intentional, but turned out to be pretty marvelous.
Were you always able to embrace that, or did it take a certain wisdom or confidence, or what allowed you the ability to go with the flow when it comes to
Well,
that?
experience, I guess, having done it more times, but if I'm playing a classical piano concert, then there's very little room for happy accidents. But they could happen there too. But music has improvisation as a part of it, jazz, blues, rock. Those are easier transitions to make.
Roger, I remember we named our garage band through a happy accident. I used to print the chord sheets on used paper, and we
Yes.
turned one over one time, and it was a PowerPoint that said "Cure the Rot." Somebody was talking about waste at the Pentagon, and we named our band "Cure the Rot."
That's right. That's right. That was a happy accident too.
Sure.
Great. Does anyone else have something to share about their creative process and happy accidents? Um,
Yes, I do.
Go ahead,
Sorry?
Haley.
Oh,
who was that?
yeah,
Go ahead, Haley.
I'm Hallie. I
Hi.
have a couple, but I'm also a musician, but I have been dabbling in arts, but I'm a jazz musician. So like the last person said, I regularly do happy accidents, but art for painting, I definitely had I have a story about one. I have maybe two to share, but okay. So I started painting a lot more during the pandemic, and then I started taking a plein air painting class, but I'd never done plein air before. So I like the first time, it was a 10-week course, but the first painting I did was just so humiliating. I don't know, because I was like, didn't budget my time or anything. Anyway, it was the at Brookside Gardens, overlooking the tulip garden. And my first one came out like this, and they always had some nice things to say about it, but it's like, compared to everybody else, is like kind of humiliating. So like the next day I was like, that's the worst thing I've ever made. So, so I decided, what I decided to do was like reduce it to like this, because I wanted to try to see if I could, I don't know, just like make a line painting. And then I noticed that this big yellow thing
Like a
was its own shape. So that turned, so I was like, oh, I'm just going to do that. So then that turned into this, which I call the fairy tulip monster, because it was the tulip garden, and I made something good out of it. And then ever since that, I made a couple other ones of this person. What's this?
Oh, wow.
And then on stage, like after a show I did, I was like, oh, I should make a stage. And then I made this one. So anytime I feel bad about something, I can just go back and make something with that. That's my story.
That's cool.
great. Very
I have another one also, but it's not as involved.
That's great. And in a way, maybe it was about that yellow blob. It wanted to be something different, right? It didn't want to be a garden.
Yeah, well,
Right?
I mean,
Maybe
I
it
was just like,
you what it actually wanted to be.
yeah, I figured it out. So I made it something happy out of something terrible.
But you were
I learned-
persistent.
I guess I was.
Did not
Yeah,
give up.
I'm better at painting now. So, but yeah, that was my first one in a while, Yeah. Thank you. Yep, to keep going with it. I have one more before you go on to other people. But yeah, I've been doing like drawing too. So yeah, I got much better. And this is a drawing of like some of the, I don't know, I was like drawing the instruments and the people I've been playing with lately, back in November, I think. And I wanted to paint that like pretty much stick figures, but color them in kind of thing. Because I do things like that. And I started to do that, but then I messed up because the trombone ended up like too far off the page. So I ended up having to, I didn't budget. So I ended up having to redo everything. And then it came out not stick figurey and more blobby. And it actually came out pretty well. So that's,
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
great.
$12.
thank you. And now I think I want to make a bigger one. So thank you. That's it.
Thank you.
I could see that going all the way around a room, like a,
Oh, yeah.
like a relief,
Oh, really? Oh,
like a music room. That could be a one little section that went all the way around the room.
mm-hmm. The border, something. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks everyone for sticking with short in the beginning. Let's call on Ken now. You've been waiting patiently. Go ahead, Ken.
All right, as you can tell, I am a cross-dresser, and we can talk about that a little bit. One of my favorite things is to dress up as a cheerleader. Where that came from, I don't know. But in terms of this particular topic, there are two main things that have kind of motivated me to try something that's a bit more ambitious than I've ever done before. There's been a lot of deaths, and one of them was Bob Johnson from my favorite band, the English folk rock group SSTCi Span. He passed away in December. And the other kind of negative thing was in 1976, when I was 25 or 26 years old, I was in library school. I did not complete it. We could go into that some other time. I did not complete it. But one of the ideas I had was to do a discography on British folk rock. And lately, people have been encouraging me to do a book about, I'm a music journalist, been writing about music for 50 years. My main thing is British folk rock and world music. And so that's a teeny little background. And I've turned my Facebook page into a music blog mostly. You can, my name's in the chat. You can take a look at it. And, I was running around with different ideas, and it finally occurred to me that I could resurrect that discography idea. You can see all the source material and all the CD piles here. There's a lot of them. And yeah, that I could, because doing anything more like an autobiography of Ken's adventures with SSTCi Span and British folk rock, or Ken's adventures with SSTCi Span and folk rock around the world, how do I put that together? I don't have a form for it. But a discography, might be a little easier to do, have to work on specifics. The other thing is, as a dry run, I had a short article in this book about Fairport Convention. Some of you may have heard of them. This is called Gonna See All My Friends. The guy who put this together, different people did short articles for it. This one guy, Richard Houghton, put it together. He's working on a sequel, and I am planning to contribute to that. And that's going to be like my dry run for the larger project, because it'll be kind of a short outline of what I might do on a larger project, with like that's going to be just one short essay for that book, but that may give me a sort of outline as to how to approach the next thing.
Okay, thank you for sharing, Ken. Does anybody else want to share kind of art, what kind of art form you're working in? And as Roger said, some art forms use somehow maybe accommodate happy accidents more than others. For instance, classical music is not as forgiving of happy accidents as jazz. So what art form do you practice, and how does it work for happy accidents, or how could you make it work to incorporate them?
Hi, Simone.
Hi,
Yeah,
Brenda.
how you doing? I haven't seen you for a while. Happy New Year. I can go.
Please.
So Yeah, as you know, I write poetry, been writing a long time. And so for many years, I would write a complete poem. It might take 2 or 3 days or something like that, but I would just write a complete piece. And then, as my writing evolved and time evolved and my schedule and stuff like that, I literally would start writing what I call bits and pieces. So I would get, inspired from these phrases or something like that. And I have like a memo pad on my phone, and I would just write it down, write the phrase down, write the phrase down, write the phrase down. And so I was like, well, I don't even write poetry anymore. I just write these lines. And I'm not exactly sure what happened, but um one day I just decided to put them together. And I was like, that's the poem. So that was pretty amazing so I'll give you an example. So this is like my little phone with all my little memos. And so I haven't looked at any of these, but this is lines. Like I have, one short note and another note and another note. So I'll just put them together and we'll see what happens. The upper room holds hope in grandma's house. It holds the light of giving and the warmth of love. The waters are cold and tempestuous. The tantalizing call of despair reaches into the soil of running women. Shall I break up the water and tear down the wind from heaven? I have become God in my own eyes, holding nothing sacred except my own pleasure. I recite the dead, sometimes three, for the ones still living inside of me. So those are just random lines that, I had in my head at different times to put together to a poem. So that pretty much has now become my process. Like that is kind of like the way I literally write poetry now. I just go out, and I mean, I have pages and pages. I'm talking about hundreds of pages. And some days I feel like working through them, and other days I just start putting together. So I really appreciate what Bob Ross shared about happy accidents, because that's literally what they are. And I never thought I would, that would my process as I got older as a poet would be like that. But that's what that's what works. So
Yeah, I think I've had two thoughts sharing when you shared that. And the first is that because you didn't tell yourself, oh, I don't have time to write poetry, so I'm not doing anything. I don't have time to, I don't have headspace to do it, so I'm not doing anything. You kept doing something, right? You gathered your snippets because that's what you could do. And in different ways, in different arts, if you gather a lot of material, maybe you're setting the stage for more happy accidents, right?
yes.
This assembly of little pieces you could put in a collage, or whatever it is, or little random things you could put in a sculpture, whatever it is you saved up, and then you can see how it combines and see what serendipity occurs. But that won't happen unless if you quit doing the work, if you quit gathering your little
Yeah.
inspirational sound bites or whatever. So you have to keep going, I think. Jerry,
Yeah,
you
you
raised your
can't be
hand.
rigid with it.
What's that? You can't be.
You can't be rigid with it.
Yes.
You have to be flexible and just say, hey, maybe I'll try something different, but like you said, definitely not stop.
Yeah, and definitely not being all or nothing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. Jerry?
Hi. I don't know if this is an actual accident, but it's an actual experience. 5 years ago, I organized community encounters, community programs, lectures, art shows, different things about Nelson Mandela for the centenary of his birth. So this was in 2018, and without trying, I ended up with a lot of footage. and some of it was just accidental. Someone who showed up at one of the events, the first event on Mandela's birthday, and filmed 45 minutes. And then there were just other, sort of random things that people showed up and took pictures of. And so I started to think, well, I've got all this material. What would make me a good steward of this material? So in a fever dream one night, I thought I could make a documentary film, which, I had no background in doing at all. But back in 2022, I took a documentary course. I secured a couple of grants to make this documentary, but I still had no editor. And I couldn't get very far with the small amount of grant that I had, and I wasn't sure, how I was going to move forward. I didn't know anything about I didn't know from a camera, an f-stop from a doorstop. So I was kind of stranded out there. I was at a gospel brunch, and a woman who is a member of this congregation came up to me and said, "Hey, I went to some of your events. Whatever happened to all that material that you had?" And I told her, I'd like to find a way to make this into a film. And she said, and it turned out that she was the director of a studio, the state-of-the-art facility with a recording booth and green screen and the whole thing. And I made my film there for a pittance, for as an amount I would never have thought I'd be able to raise, in any other scenario. And so I would say that accidents can happen, but they're just not individual. They're not always individual. And some of this, from my point of view, can occur just by the circles that you're moving in, and things and coincidences and so forth that, would come out of a Dickens novel. You'd say, well, now how could that ever happen? How could these two people ever get together and find out, whatever, something that would manifest, an artistic outcome. And so when I think about accidents, in a way, I think there are no accidents. And that if you've been pursuing an interest, if you're in those circles where things like that can happen, it often does. And it's nothing I could have planned on my own.
Yeah, but you
Oh, by the way, the film was finished. I had a premiere here where I live. I live in Duluth, Minnesota, but I used to live in Tacoma Park in Washington, and had my premiere of the film on January 6th.
Do you have a website or something you can share in the chat so we can learn
I
more
will.
about your
I'll share our Facebook page.
Great.
Thank you. Nice
Thank
to
you
talk
for
about it.
sharing.
And let you know you're so lucky in Silver Spring to have this arts bonanza. I mean, I've participated in some of the other events that you've had, and it's really quite a wonderful thing to be able to have this asset in your community.
That's a wonderful testimonial to all your work, Lisa, that coming back from Minnesota take once again. Well, it's great to have you. And yeah, we look forward to learning more about that documentary. Yeah. So that's a good point, where Kevin, go ahead.
When you're done, yeah, go on.
Oh, just that, the people we can serendipitously meet can help, increase our chances for having happy accidents too.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Kevin, and I'm not an artist, not a musician, not a performer, don't even cook very much. But I like the work that Richard and Simone do, and that's really why I signed up. I've seen a lot of things they've done. But Lisa sent me a note and reminded me of something in terms of happy accidents, and it kind of goes along with what Jerry was just talking about. That and again, I'm not an artist at all, but a number of years ago, 30 years ago, when we moved to Tacoma Park, I started volunteering at the Tacoma Park Folk Festival, and I was just one of many volunteers, and a low-level person, and quite happy doing that. And we had a young family, and I did my part. And the chair died unexpectedly in the spring one year, and the festival wasn't going to happen if someone didn't step up to be the chair. And I was not the logical person, but nobody else wanted to do it, and I said okay. And it opened up a huge world of the cultural activities in this area, in the county, even in the state, for me. And subsequently, I've gone on to work on a lot of other things, and that's how I know Lisa, actually. And what's really neat about it, exciting about it, is the more, this is sort of to Jerry's point, the more people you know, the more people you run into, the more connections you see, and the more things you can help happen, and you can contribute in whether it's getting a production done, or a piece of art done, or being sort of more the support kind of role I am. And it just amazes me how these opportunities come up over and over again, if you just keep meeting people and keep listening, and you hear something and it makes something click in your head, and it's an accident, right? It's running into someone, it's an accident, and it turns into something. So anyway.
Yeah. Thank you, Kevin. Yeah, we're fans of your work too. And but
I mean, it's really cool. Like, I mean, for years, the Tacoma Park Folk Festival, the performers aren't paid. They perform for free because we just simply couldn't afford it any other way, because there's a lot of performers. But a couple of years ago, as a part-time job, I started working for the city of Gaithersburg, and on special events. And the person who ran the summer concert series left the organization, and my boss was handed that job, and she didn't want it. She doesn't care about music, and she's new to the area. She said, you kind of like music, right? You like go to music and stuff. And so all of a sudden I'm like, yeah, I've spent 30 years getting to know the musicians around here, and now you're giving me a budget? So I literally called up musicians I had known and seen, and said, I can actually pay you for once. Would you like to perform in Gaithersburg? And so, yeah, happy accidents, right? So anyway.
I just want to pick up on one word you said, which is when you meet people and listen. Because I think, as artists, we're taught you have to be promotional, you got to get yourself out there, got to, which you do, you got to eat, but you also have to listen to others for these things to happen. What are they doing? It's not all about you, right? What they're doing. And then there might be the synergy, but you have to know where they're coming from too. I think it's an important part of the puzzle. Richard, did you have anything else you wanted to share?
Oh, I could share another happy accident. I don't know if it's happy. It's kind of demented, but I was walking through the forest off of Sligo Creek one day, and in the mud, like covered with leaves and mud, was a dollhouse. And so I don't know why I picked it up and brought it home. And it sat in the basement for a while, and then I guess it was during the pandemic, I just kept looking at it and thinking, what can I do with that? And so I decided to make it a demented dollhouse, and I turned it into what I call Manifest Destiny Bed and Breakfast. So it's sort of, every room has something to do with kind of the ethnic cleansing that happened because of Manifest Destiny. And then I turned that into a short little film. I can just show you what it looks like. So yeah, it was just all covered with mud, and I painted it, and I put it on a little rotating stand like you'd have inside of a department store window. So you can see Indian land for sale. And then inside, there's a Hollywood film being made of cowboys slaughtering Indians. And then down in the lower right, there's Trump in the window. And that's the Mexican flag that represents the Mexican War. It's not, definitely not for kids. So then that film that's being made, and you know, that's basically like the John Wayne movies. And then I put in scenes of John Wayne, and those kids are watching on a tiny little TV the scene that's being shot upstairs, and they're surrounded by products. There's a Redskins flag. Anyway, this whole film and art piece was really only done because I stumbled upon a dollhouse in the forest. It has sound. I can put the link in the chat if you're a glutton for punishment and want to watch it. So anyway, I will stop sharing that. It's better with the sound because the narration, the sound is from old educational films, and the narration is just nauseatingly white supremacist, which is what classroom films were like in the 1950s.
Wow, that's really something.
It was
Yeah.
it was, you know, sometimes these things you do just for therapy, not necessarily for any big audience. I have no idea what to do with this dollhouse now. It takes up too much space, and I think maybe I'll just like put it in the lobby of some place somewhere, see what happens to it.
Well, we could light it on fire and make that the end of the film.
Yeah, that's true. We could do that. Or drop it off of a tall bridge back into the same forest.
I didn't know you were a tiny house builder, Richard. You know, we host the tiny house building workshop every winter with artist Marcy Wolf Hubbard, and it filled very quickly. We're in the first, you know, we just had the first of 3 weekly sessions. I had my own happy accident in building one of my tiny houses a couple of years, was it last year? No, a couple of years ago. And I don't really have it handy to show, but I built a big condo, and I thought, oh God, it's really gigantic, and I like to buy the furniture, and it's costly. And so the other side, the front of it, I decided it didn't come out the shape as I had hoped. We make it out of paper mache. And it was like a sauna house with a sauna downstairs like they have in the Nordic countries. And then also I had just been in Iceland in 2019 at the Blue Lagoon, and so I put a Blue Lagoon on the top. So like a spa, you know, on the rooftop. And then I just decided to build a volcano on the side of the tiny house. It's a 3-story with the Blue Lagoon on the roof, and then I painted I just kept adding on to it. And these things do take up a lot of space. So I'm kind of leery about, I'm already doing my next one, which is Pueblo Mágico, like the magical towns in Mexico, which will, give me plenty of chance to decorate with all the vibrant colors and the folkloric imagery that you see in these magical towns in Mexico. So
That's cool.
but it's
couple
a big commitment in size and math.
I have a couple of that are not assembled yet that I would like to fit into suitcase so they'd be easier to carry around. But now I remember the reason I got this idea was I did a program for C-SPAN on a, you may have seen this because there's an exhibit at the Smithsonian, but in Baltimore, they have something called the Nutshell Studies of Unexplained Deaths.
Yeah, they had it at the Renwick, right? Several years ago.
But
I love
I can show you these were built by a woman who wanted a more systematic way for crime scene investigators to study you know, you walk into a scene and you're like, what happened here? And you don't know. So there's
Mhm.
like 18 of these things, and they're amazing. She spent
Mhm.
basically in the 1940s, she spent as much as you would spend on buying a real house for each room, like $4,000. And they're still used today. They're better than the people who use them say they're better than uh, virtual reality techniques for studying a mysterious death scene. So if you ever get a chance, check that out. There's
So
a
that's
book.
still on exhibit at
No, you
the,
have to get an appointment to see them now, but they're used.
oh,
They're at the Baltimore Medical Examiner's Office. They're actually used for training seminars several times a year, but you can get a tour if you contact them and ask for a tour.
but that's really only if you have a valid reason to bother them, right? Not
Well,
just
I
out of
don't know.
curiosity.
You could probably join another group. I mean, I don't think,
Okay.
yeah,
It has
but
want to
they're
visit there
stepping
on the
on it.
website.
Yeah. What's that?
Oh.
It says on the top right corner, the star, it
Mhm.
says want to visit. So
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, what was her name? The woman, she was the first woman to really work in forensics, and she did the crime reenactment dioramas,
I
and that
can't
was at the
remember.
Renwick. Yeah, that got me kind of more interested in miniatures. And then when COVID hit, we started doing the tiny house building as a virtual thing to keep us busy. Um, as our houses felt maybe tinier, as we spent more of our lives indoors during COVID, and especially through that first winter. But we always had the connection, at least virtually, and that's why we still do hybrid programming too, because people do like to also have that. And folks who used to live here, like Jerry Williams, said she had moved away, but can still connect with us here in Silver Spring, Tacoma Park area. So we're glad to have her as still participant in our community. So who else is there anyone else in the audience that would like to share? I'll turn it back over to Simone and Richard.
well, I was Richard, you're muted. Did you want to say something? Still
I was
coming
just going to say it was Frances Glessner Lee. That was the woman who made these little tiny houses.
Well, when Lisa first handed us the assignment, Richard came up with a few things he could share pretty quickly, and I couldn't. And I thought, that's interesting. Why can't I? And I think it is because I have a very perfectionist streak that makes me reluctant to go with the accident. And then instead, like, oh, that's a mistake. I'm going to ignore that. I'm not going to, I'm going to put that aside, or I can't do that. Right. So I think I'm realizing part of the happy accident philosophy is being able to let go of perfectionism and let go of that little voice that says, oh, this isn't good, or this isn't what a real artist would do, and embrace the fact that it's okay. Maybe sometimes it's okay to play and not think about the outcome. Just play and be open, and then maybe it'll actually be better than what you think or not, but embrace the process a little more. So in that vein, I will share something. It's not really an accident so much, and I'll put this by my face. It's still going to be hard to see, isn't it? Yeah. But when I was between jobs, I was able to take Katie Dell Kaufman's collage class in the afternoon, which I would recommend. Unfortunately, it's not. It's more of a retirement or because it's like 11 to 1:30 or something. So I could only take it for a bit. And a lot of things I do I wasn't happy with, but we'd different exercises. They were just exercises, but I kept them, and I realized that they actually would work very well for another project. So my mother, she passed away a year and a half ago. And one thing I inherited from her was her encyclopedias, because she was French, and at the time, and the family she was in, girls weren't really expected to do much. And the system was you went and got an education, vocational till you age 16, or if you were college bound, which is more boys, then you went and got your full baccalaureate. But and so her parents, well, you know, all you're going to do is like be a secretary. So she only had that level of education. But she actually used encyclopedias and other books to teach herself the remaining 2 years and passed the baccalaureate on her own, because she was that curious in spite of the constrictures put on her. So last time I was in France, my uncle said, Simone, what are we going to do with your mother's encyclopedias? There's a whole shelf of these encyclopedias. And it's like, gee, I'd love to take them home, but that's going to be a heck of a lot of shipping to bring a whole set of, big encyclopedias. So what I ended up doing was tearing out a lot of the pages in them. So maybe I'll do a collage, maybe I'll do something with them. And then I found an art center in France and gave the rest of the encyclopedias, which still had a lot of stuff, but I brought in, a stack of the nice pictures. And I realized that I can cut out things like the butterfly here and put it on one of those old, collage exercises. And then I have something maybe a little more interesting. So, again, I think it's about keeping stuff, right? Holding on to things you see potential in until you find the way that you can bring them together. But that's also a double-edged sword, because as we've talked, if our supplies are the things we see potential in are big, it kind of can take over our house. And as Richard and I are planning to move, we are feeling a lot of things, right, that we might never get around to, but it's hard to let go of because you see potential for happy accidents in it.
That leads me to a happy accident, another one. Yeah, cleaning out the house means going through the attic and going through all my old artwork and trying to decide what to do with it. And I'm sure most people who've done drawing and painting have that problem. So I found something I did in, I think it was art school. It was a ink drawing of Bob Dylan. And wait just a minute, I will share my screen. And it was kind of, I had maybe put something on top of it. And he's got dirt all around it that couldn't be cleaned up. But I have a dear friend who really likes Bob Dylan. So I thought, oh, I'll fix it up and I'll give it to him for a present and frame it. So I decided to go a little crazy with it and put a lot of color in it and outline the ink part of it a lot more. And then I put it in a frame that got rid of all of this smudgies down here. I think I cut that off. So it was a win-win because my friend liked it and I got something out of the attic.
So does anybody out there struggle with perfectionism or art supply hoarding or any other issues that keep you from happy accidents or and if you have a film synopsis here too in the chat, make sure you check the chat before you go, because there's good content there too. And Kevin, have you seen any accidents in all your time in the folk festival, a few musicians? Any sort of things that happened?
I don't think Kevin is on
No,
anymore.
Kevin is not on anymore.
Uh-oh, faux pas.
Someone's just coming back in, maybe not.
Perhaps I did.
No, it's not him. There's another.
Ken has a hand up.
Okay.
All right. Ken, do you have an accident you can share? Happy accident?
Well, not so much accidents. I mean, I'm really trying to get my head around this idea. But does anybody else here have trouble, when they have an idea for something that they want to do, asking for support or trying to figure out how to do it? And, I am intimidated by power structure, rules, regulations, fear of failure. Anybody else have trouble with those things?
Yeah, I think that's where my perfectionism kicks in. It's fear of failure, fear of not being good enough. Absolutely.
Right? I mean, if you're like afraid that the thing isn't going to work out, you're not going to do it properly, it won't be accepted.
Yeah, you can really, I really do struggle with overthinking it and learning to embrace the process and learning to know that maybe it's not for me to say whether it's good or not, right? Maybe that remains to be determined, right? Or that it's not going to be used, maybe it's going to be useful to somebody in ways I never imagined, right? So to let go of some of that.
I mean, I'm not a filmmaker or a sculptor or a musician. I write about musicians. That's what I do. The closest thing I've gotten to performing is when I dress up in the cheerleader thing, and that's fun. It's a release. I'm certainly not a professional drag artist or anything like that. But it's very. Do any of you think that your personal history, family history, anything like that, played any role in making embarking on projects harder? My father had a temper. My sister and I were verbally abused. I think that's one reason I'm so afraid of failure and intimidated by authority, power structure, rejection, all of that.
Richard, do you want to talk about your documentary bit?
Well, yeah, I'm making a documentary about my family right now. I certainly have a lot of fear of failure and that people aren't going to understand things. So my father has an identical twin brother, and they didn't speak to each other for 20 years, which you don't normally find with identical twins. And I happen to have been filming my family for 30 or 40 years, including interviews with my grandparents, who were very weird. And my grandfather was abusive to my father and my uncle. But I have all this footage, so I'm trying to shape it into a narrative. And it's called Antique Grudges, a family story. And part of the reason it's called Antique Grudges is because my father and uncle sort of split in a feud over the antiques that my grandparents left behind because they were antique dealers. But yeah, I mean, families are messy. And I mean, I just read a biography of Van Gogh, and even 20 years after Van Gogh died, his mother still hated his paintings and said they were no good. He struggled to get approval from his parents. And I mean, maybe that's part of the reason why his art is so interesting, but it's also tragic, I mean, his mother was so cold and nasty. But I mean, you can, if you've had trouble with your family, you can think of it as a inspiration to, as a catharsis to deal with your demons.
Maybe the musicians can pipe in about whether you were encouraged to do music, or was it seen as something you should do, or was it something that was seen as impractical? So you're thinking about it.
Let's see how many, I know we have keyboardist, musician, Roger Coleman. What other musicians are with us in the audience? Any other musicians? Performers?
Well, I'm Hallie.
Hallie is. Oh, okay.
What was the question?
Well, whether music was something that you were encouraged to do, or was it viewed as something impractical and you were discouraged?
Well, maybe some of each, yes. I wasn't discouraged to do it, but it's definitely not an office job. That's what is normal, but I've made a living out of it for the most part. And people find it kind of impressive, I guess, even though, it doesn't make a lot of money, but I wish I were more of a perfectionist. I think I'm an imperfect perfectionist, but
Go on with that. I'm interested.
well, I'd like to be a perfectionist. I know what one would do if one were a perfectionist, and I know other people who work harder and are more perfectionist than I am. But I feel bad that I'm not a perfectionist like they are. But and I think I'm expected to be more like that to fit in or to be accepted or something or to have what I do be accepted by the majority of people who I know who are more perfectionists than I am. But I don't know if you understand that, but
What kind of music do
I-
you do, Haley?
I'm a jazz musician. I play saxophone and clarinet. I'm play in my own jazz bands and a lot of other. I'm a freelance musician. A lot of big bands for swing dancing, and I play in restaurants and I play for Mardi Gras celebrations, stuff like that. So I'm not really sure. I think what was the question? We were talking about if your perfectionism prevents you from doing things. I don't know. I think mine's the opposite. That prevents me from not being a perfectionist, prevents me from doing things or something like that, or from being accepted by it. Because I guess the majority of the people I'm around are perfectionists. I'm thinking they are. Maybe that's a bad situation to be in.
Well, and the problem is if you're not a perfectionist and you like to just do things and maybe sometimes they're mediocre, then you feel like an imposter,
Well, I feel like other people think I'm an imposter, but anyway, but not being a perfectionist is good because then you can experiment and
Yeah, I
do
agree.
things.
Perfectionism seems like it's immobilizing.
Anyway, I feel like having now visual art as like a side project has been really nice because I can just do my own. I can do art without anybody else, basically, because when I play music, I'm always with other musicians. I'm never unaccompanied, whereas art I can just do by myself immediately. So so now I have a good balance. Something.
Right.
Anyway,
Yeah.
I think it's 8:00.
Okay, great. Yeah, I was just gonna say, music relies on collaboration, whereas art generally is more of an independent thing. Filmmaking can be either, really, right? Because
Well,
one person could do everything.
There aren't many people that do it alone.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Just a
I think
sheer
I heard Charlton Heston say one time about Orson Welles, he said, if he had been a painter, he would have been a happier person, but he just couldn't get along with anybody. And that's why he had so much trouble after making Citizen Kane. It was a
Right.
collaborative, and he was always difficult.
Well, and this general difference between performing and visual artists too, as we saw during the pandemic when we went virtual for that period of time, artists really thrived because of the environment of the performing artists really suffered because they relied on the income from performances. And even like the comics who would perform for free, for example, they rely on the live, the laughter and the feed, the interaction of the audience and performer. And that's important whether you're doing it pro bono or not. And we even tried to show a lot of some concerts through Zoom, and it was awful. It really, they don't, it didn't give the music justice, and it just didn't have that kind of feeling that you get with live performance. And I sing in a couple choirs, and um who would have thought that one of the riskiest things you could do is singing in a church, I sang with the Washington International Chorus, and it was led by a woman who was an expert in public health policy. And she announced within a couple of weeks of COVID that she was dissolving the choir. And I thought, we just need to wait a little while. And so it took a couple of years before we came back, but I joined another choir instead. And I also sing with the Estonian choir. But then on the same note, it worked well with visual arts. Like we have the tiny house building workshop going on now, for example, and people like to be home making their art in their own environment. And then artists also tended to profit as well with because people were spending more money on things for the home, like art. So instead of going out. So it was an interesting thing that happened. That I think other people, maybe Roger could speak to this as a musician as well. It was something I observed anyway. And I'm just glad we're getting back, we're back to normal pretty much. So, but a happy accident though is that we have this hybrid option too. We still do some of our events this way. So, but Simone.
I thought maybe Roger and Heidi were trying to
Yeah.
unmute.
Did you have a comment, Roger?
Well, what you said about live performances, virtual, except versus virtual. There's no substitute for being in the environment of a live performance. You can watch something on Zoom or on YouTube, and it's just not the same as being there. Even it's the same performance. If you're live, you're part of the atmosphere, part of the environment, and that live element is the most exciting aspect. Probably Hallie knows that from playing in jazz. I also play in some big bands, and it's a lot of fun. It's an interaction, and you feel like you're communicating on a level that is not always possible just through speech alone. And whether it's classical or jazz or ragtime or blues, it has its own language and it has its own connection on an interpersonal level too.
Mm-hmm.
Being out of sync.
Thank you, Jerry. Good
That
to see you.
That micro delay
Mhm.
that happens when you're trying to play with somebody.
Yeah,
over
I'm
Zoom
just talking
or
about
something.
witnessing. Just looking at a recorded performance is not the same as a live one.
Right.
Oh, Lisa, you're muted.
So Roger, did you do some virtual events during COVID, and what was it like for you? How did it feel?
Well, I did. Like when COVID came, I couldn't play with any of the bands that I'm in. So one thing I did is I just took my guitar and went to people's houses and knocked on their doors and played them a song
From outside.
from outside, from a safe distance. The friends of mine in the neighborhood, I just drove through Silver Spring and Tacoma Park. And a lot of these people I know, I have a connection with, I know what their favorite songs are, and so I played it for them. And then, I play classical piano, I give recital concerts, I couldn't do that. And so I did a virtual one online, just to kind of do it, because I felt restricted by not being able to. And it wasn't the same as walking out on stage and feeling an audience and being in that moment, but it was what I had available, so I utilized that.
Right. Well, we're glad you're back in action, and we had to change our. We used to have the bands on the plaza, and we don't bring bands anymore due to the skateboarding. So we have dance events which fill the plaza and kind of naturally take it over. but I miss having the bands out there and with your group singing my favorite song by America, Ventura Highway.
Yes.
And yeah, so the 70s, old 70s. And I remember realizing why I love 70s music so much. It's because of the happy memories I had, you know, when all my loved ones were still alive, grandparents, for example. So, great. Well, good to see you and Heidi, Roger.
You too.
Thanks, Craig, for the comment you put in the chat. And I think it's very true that sometimes, these accidents that we have on the social sphere, when we run into people and we have these, amazing connections that we can make with them and develop into friendships or collaborations. And also the idea, we all kind of store speech paper to put into presentations later. And maybe that is a form of art too, right? It's not a paid artist job, but yeah, it is a form of art to, to mix and match these things into new creations.
Let me just share one more happy accident.
Oh yes.
So we had a toilet seat that looked nasty, and I thought, I don't want to buy a new toilet seat. So I painted it. I put gesso on it, painted the seat, then painted the back, and then painted the top. And then so depending on what your arrangement is for when it's up or down, the face changes. So if you're a male and you're doing your business, it looks like that. But if the seat's down, it looks like that. And I did not plan that. It all just kind of happened while I was panning happily and listening to loud music.
So
Great.
yeah,
Good.
just reminder of some of the upcoming events before we say goodbye.
Yes.
Be around
Thank you. I'll come back on and thank you guys. So thank you so much to Richard and Simone with nerdsmakemedia.com. Visit their website. I've seen a lot of your films and they're all kind of quirky topics and really, they're excellent documentarians, filmmakers. And just a little known secret, my boyfriend and I kind of started dating as a result of your screening of American Feud back in 2018.
Well, you must be real nerds.
We are. So you guys are kind of like my little happy accident, I guess. Well, great. Well, I hope everyone can join us also for our upcoming events. I'm putting our schedule here, and then also our Around the World Bazaar, which is really a fun event. It's free, and there's hands-on art activities, and we've got 2 performance areas, including comedy and choral music, as well as a lot of dancing, and the Chinese lion dance for the Lunar New Year. It's going to be Friday, February 9th at the Civic Building. So come on out. Thank you again, Richard and Simone, Nerds Make Media. We had a great time. Thank you everyone for joining us.
Nice to see everybody.
Yep. Hope to see you in
Take
person
care.
soon. Bye-bye.
Good to meet you. Good
Great.
to meet you. I may send you a
Bye-bye.
Facebook friend request.
Thanks, Ken.
Bye-bye.
Take care.